Hey Bob, it's me, Slugger. It's been a while, hasn't it? Look, I don't need you to say anything. Just hear me out. I made some mistakes with my tool store video. I took the build for granted and didn't check with you to make sure I was right. I guess I've been a bit of a jerk lately, huh? But we can fix it, right? Robert, can we fix it?
Yes, we can!
Hey Rock Raiders, we're back again to hopefully make up for some mistakes I made in my last episode. By and large, I was genuinely pleased with the way the tool store video turned out and was even more humbled by the positive reception you all gave it. Unfortunately, it was brought to my attention that my build of the tool store had some errors in it, and upon further inspection, it definitely did. Rather than taking that video down and trying to re-edit it with the new build instructions, I thought it would make more sense to package that into a new episode that also discusses the process of reverse engineering these buildings from the in-game models and other available resources. I think I can guarantee you that by the time we're done this video, you'll be able to see why this process is so ambiguous. One other minor point before we continue, I've been saying this since my very first video, but I am not an expert on Rock Raiders, just a fan. I'm not privy to insider information, and I don't know everything that went on during development. I wasn't there. Please don't take any of my words as gospel. This is going to be a long video, so if you're only here for the revised tool store instructions, please skip to this timestamp. With that disclaimer out of the way, let's get started. So, one of the biggest head scratchers I've been facing lately is trying to determine exactly who originally built these in-game exclusive models. For those who do not know, LEGO Rock Raiders was the first LEGO theme to be designed both as a toy and a video game concurrently. This was accomplished by dividing the work into two teams, the LEGO Group proper, based out of Denmark, and Data Design Interactive, based out of the UK. I wish it were as simple as TLG designed the sets and DDI designed the game, and while this is largely true, there was a vast amount of collaboration on many aspects. For example, the LMS Explorer was actually the brainchild of DDI originally. The concept renders were then later sent to the LEGO Group to be partially constructed out of bricks to model the cutscenes from. As another example, Simeon Hankins, the art designer who created the character of Chief, worked at DDI, not the LEGO Group. Hopefully you're seeing that there is a fair bit of overlap going on here, and many elements that one might have assumed the LEGO Group designed were actually created by DDI instead. We know that TLG designed all 8 of the retail sets, which DDI modeled into the game, but there are several buildings and vehicles that appear which were never part of any LEGO set. While we have a plethora of documentation about TLG's design process with the retail sets, nearly nothing exists for how the in-game exclusive models came to be. Up until a few weeks ago, I had assumed DDI designed and constructed them, using pieces sent from Denmark. This seemed to track with CEO Stuart Green's statements that they had access to everything Rock Raiders related in the form of LEGO bricks. New information has been brought to my attention that doesn't disprove this statement, but it does cause me to question my prior assumptions. Firstly, I assumed these other awful prototype models had to have been slapped together by someone at DDI. However, as bad as they were pulled from an email archive and were sent to DDI from the LEGO Group. So no, DDI did not build these. That alone poked a hole in my argument, but this next bit of info blew the doors wide open. In March of 2000, Karen Moltenbury wrote an article for Computer Graphics World about the genesis of Rock Raiders for the PC and PlayStation. In it, she interviews Thomas Gillow, the then head of concept development at LEGO Media International, the company's software division. This article is an interesting read, but there was one paragraph in particular that hooked me. The toy provided a strong starting point for us, but there weren't enough buildings and such to enable an interesting gaming experience, says Gillo. We had to create a much larger universe for the digital characters. It's vague, I know, but I am willing to interpret this to mean that during the production of the game, DDI or LEGO Media International requested that more structures be designed to deepen the gameplay. These buildings were likely never meant to become retail sets, but were still probably designed by the original team in Denmark and sent to DDI. To make a long story short, I think it's safe to say that with the current amount of information available to us, the LEGO Group designed the game-exclusive builds, and DDI created the renders and modeled them for use in-game. Why exactly is this significant, though? Well, unfortunately, it means that we can't rule out certain pieces from these builds. Had the situation been reversed, like my previous assumption, then DDI would only have been able to construct these models with pieces the LEGO Group sent them, which in this case would have more than likely been Rock Raiders pieces. As it is, however, there are no limits to what the designers in Denmark could do, since they were in an environment where they could feasibly whip up any piece in any color as needed, substantially expanding the brick palette we have to work with here. With all of that out of the way, let's look at what sources we have available when reverse engineering these game-exclusive builds. Well, obviously we have the in-game models, but they're pretty dicey and take a lot of shortcuts in order to improve performance. I'd label these as less than reliable sources of information. Luckily, the instruction manual contains a single-angle, high-quality render of each building and vehicle in the game. More than anything else, these can help us to surmise what the original physical models might have looked like. It's far from perfect, but it's the best we've got. Lastly, we have the texture files themselves. Both used and unused textures should be considered here, as they were more than likely based on a detail from the physical model at some point. However, this is LEGO Rock Raiders we're talking about, so nothing concerning the game files is easy. Plenty of obsolete material still exists on the disc, so we need to take everything here with a gallon of salt. So now we've got our priorities. There is certainly a modicum of subjectivity here, but I believe that making sure the final build reflects what is in the high-quality renders should be priority number one. Secondly, I think it's wise to consider using Rock Raiders pieces whenever possible. Thirdly, I think the texture files should be given consideration. They grant us partial glimpses into certain details that would otherwise be completely hidden. Placing the in-game models at the bottom of this lineup may seem counterintuitive to our end goal of recreating them in LEGO, but I'm not exaggerating when I say they are rough guides at best. We really need to rely on these first three priorities if we're going to get these models as close as possible. So with all of that being established, let's re-examine the tool store. Starting with our first priority, we can see in the high-quality render that... hang on, that's not the tool store. We hit our first roadblock already. Both the teleport pad and the tool store were rendered with their prototype builds, not their final in-game models. In fact, this looks much more like the tool store we know and love. Well, that's because it is. Kind of. It's complicated. As the design for the teleport pad matured, this prototype model was later revisited once it became apparent that the tool store would also need the ability to teleport miners in order to serve the gameplay needs. By adding power containers, raising the base, and extending the landing pad, we can surmise the route the developers took in adapting the design to better suit this new role. This is all speculative, of course, but we do have some supporting evidence. If we open the Lightwave file for the in-game model, we can see a clear distinction between certain recognizable elements, with this separate 4x4 plate sticking out to me the most. Overlaying a digital recreation of the tool store using LEGO bricks exposes issues with the in-game model. Perhaps in an effort to add the illusion of a base plate, both this 4x8 brick and 4x4 plate were stretched 33% taller, just like grabbing a JPEG and stretching it up. Since the height of a brick is comprised of 3 plates, this is the equivalent of just adding another plate. When a plate itself is scaled up 33%, well, that's when the madness starts. Here's the key takeaway though. Because of these scaling issues, the parts needed to build this thing exactly as it appears in-game just don't exist, and never have. If you want to build something that best captures what was there before this digital resizing was done, then it probably looks something like this. The only problem is that this is a truly unsatisfying build. Everything is floating loosely, there's no cohesion. Let's see if we can fix that and make a model that adheres to these design principles yet still feels complete. I'm going to do this by making modifications to the tool store build from the last episode, as it was mostly there. You don't have to follow my example, but I am going to try to use Rock Raiders pieces only whenever possible. It's also important to note that we lost our primary source, so we are in the weeds here for sure. Let's take a look and see what we can come up with. First off, these slope bricks are just in the wrong spot. They need to be one stud further out on both sides. We'll need a 2x10 plate on the bottom to accommodate this change, but unfortunately Rock Raiders doesn't have access to one in dark gray, so we're going to use the black one from the small transport truck. In order to build this entirely out of Rock Raiders parts, I'm going to substitute these 2x2 slopes out for 2 pairs of 2x1s, as these actually appeared in both the Loader Dozer and Granite Grinder sets. Drop in a pair of 1x2 bricks from the Rapid Rider and attach the containers. Again, you don't have to follow my example exactly as it appears here, but I am going to take this 4x6 brick out and substitute it with 2x4s that we find in the Rock Raiders HQ set. Also, this light gray brick on the back is supposed to be the same color as the front. It just has a light seam line between the top and bottom, creating an optical illusion. Once we reattach all of the remaining pieces, we are left with one final detail to mull over. Do we keep this 4x4 plate? This is the same 4x4 plate I mentioned earlier in the video, and it is at the epicenter of these scaling issues. I'm gonna leave this one up to you. I think I prefer the look of including it, but I also think excluding it is more correct, so I don't know. At long last, after a year of waiting and a botched first attempt, we have what I think I can say is the most likely solution to the tool store puzzle. Am I really gonna go through the time and effort of remaking step-by-step instructions and syncing them to the music like I already did in the last episode?
Of course I am!
Thanks for watching, everyone. Hopefully we don't make a habit out of having to make a redo video after each episode going forward. As emphasized before, at present we cannot say that any of these builds are without a shadow of a doubt 100% correct, but we can try to get them as close as we're able to using the tools we have. Going forward, these videos are going to endeavor to do just that. Speaking of which, what do we have coming up next? Well, by far the most requests were for the power station and support station, but there were also a significant number of people who wanted to see these episodes roll out in the order that they are constructed in-game. To that end, let's pop some ore into upgrading our tool store and teleport pad so we can get ready for our next project. I've been your host, RR Slugger, and I hope to see you next time for some more high adventure deep underground.